For USCFootball.com, I'm Keely Eure here with Dan Weber for instant analysis of USC's Tuesday practice of Arizona State Week. Now, we were all curious how the Trojans would return after the blowout loss to Oregon. It seemed like pretty much same old, but we did see some new faces at practice. We saw University President Dr. Carol Folt and Chairman of the Board of Trustees, Rick Caruso. They made an appearance at practice. This was what we believe was Carol Folt's first appearance since she first was named a University President and came and met the team. So, interesting timing for those two to return to practice.
Well, I do think there was another issue involved. I think Carol has had, we'll call her Carol because we always called Max. So I don't know if that's appropriate or not. But I think there were several meetings today with like presidents of the Trojan clubs here, and also the Board of Athletic counselors, I believe they called them. So she had already a couple of things scheduled over here. And she's been getting, I'll be honest, a lot of feedback here yesterday, today, about what all is going on with the athletic directors, naming, selection maybe even out there, and then where the football coach situation ends up. So it kind of seemed like a natural thing to do. We were actually kind of mentioning that she might be the next person, because we saw a lot of people going by and thought, President Folt, I was probably making a little joke about going by on a skateboard, so she didn't go by on a skateboard, but within a couple of minutes she was going by with Rick Caruso, and they were heading to practice, and it was a very friendly kind of get-together with Clay. I mean, it's obvious, that they like Clay, and Clay likes them, and so that was a nice little interlude at the beginning of practice, and that was a good thing to do.
Yeah, Helton was asked if they had a message for him, because they did have that little meeting during practice, and he said he didn't really go into specifics, but he said that he's always felt their support. He said that Carol Folt was the first person he actually saw in the locker room following Saturday's game, but that's an interesting person to see, the first person to see after the loss.
That is a good way to say it. I think he actually said the first person I bumped into after the game in the locker room was President Folt, which I think that indicates a commitment to be in there when the coach and the players get there. So I think that was a good move by her. And I do think she's hearing an awful lot of conversation and suggestions and what have you about what needs to happen with USC football right now. And she's new and learning her way around, and I just thought it was a good move by her. I thought she should be here. This is one of those days. If you're going to be here, you probably come on a day like this.
Yeah, it was an interesting analogy too to the kind of dichotomy that's happening. Practice is going on, there's a game on Saturday, but then there's a whole other world happening outside of it of what could happen to USC football going forward. So seeing her there was an interesting duality there. But as far as the football game on Saturday, we got to talk to Kedon Slovis, who was responsible for 4 turnovers on Saturday, and I asked him what was the learning lesson out of that, and obviously take better care of the ball. And Graham Harrell said that he spoke to Kedon Slovis about his ability to make things happen. With that Drake London touchdown, he was able to move around in the pocket, but that also can be a detriment like that fumble. So he said it's a double-edged sword. So how do you, if you're the coaches, how do you work on that double-edged sword? I know that was something that Sam Darnold also had to work on too with that escapability, but what do you do with Kedon's freshman mistakes in that sense?
I think it's interesting because even on the touchdown, Graham said, nice play. I don't want you to ever do that again. You're going left, go left. Don't throw it across the field. That nothing but bad things are going to normally happen. So there were a lot of things, as Graham said. You got to sometimes, if you're down there knocking on the door for USC to go up 17-7, and he said sometimes you just have to throw it away, or sometimes you just have to you have to get a sack. But he said one thing you just can't do is turn it over. I mean, he said that's the thing that you learn to do, and I think you only learn it by doing it. But Kedon was in the middle of a lot of things that USC could have had go their way and went the other way, and that's a learning lesson for Kedon. Yeah. I just think you have to go through it and do it and think it through. And I mean, there were times I think that he could have dumped the ball off and just didn't see him, and made the play much more difficult. I think they're going to talk about really working with him on pocket presence and feeling comfortable because the thing they like about him so much is he naturally keeps his eyes downfield when he's moving around.
Yeah.
But what he needs to naturally do is move around. He needs to just get a real feel of when you have to move around, when you extend the play, how do you, do all the things, how do you see everything that you need to see, even with your eyes downfield. You got to kind of pick up everything. And again, he's an 18-year-old freshman.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just almost impossible for all the things that he has to pick up. But I think there's a lot of conversation going on between, it's obvious how much Graham likes Keaton.
Yeah.
It's obvious how much talent he thinks Keaton has. And it's obvious how much he wants, he said, I love coaching him. He's a great kid to coach. And but it's not an easy, it's not like you can do in some sports or some positions in football where you can kind of have a long, slow, steady progress.
Yeah.
Quarterback, you might take 3 or 4 steps forward one week and you take 3 or 4 steps backwards the next week.
Yeah.
It just, there's so many things that can happen, and there's so much pressure and so many, there are games we've seen where Keaton has looked perfect, and then there are games where, if he has that perfect game, they win, and he has that, game with 3 or 4 turnovers and they lose. And it comes down to, very often it comes down to, in an offense like this, it comes down to the quarterback and all the decisions he makes. And Saturday wasn't a good one.
Yeah, and the thing about that is him progressing as a freshman, all eyes are on that quarterback position. So it's not like you're a corner, maybe a corner you do get called out, but a guard or something where you're not as noticed. But I was about to ask you, with those mistakes, how much do you just chalk it up to him being a freshman and him having to go through those growing pains in an unexpected situation where he didn't think he was going to play in this season? Or is it up to the coaches to maybe install new drills that help him see the field better? How much of this is experience versus coaching?
Well, I thought Graham said something interesting today he said how well they practiced today. And then he said, we went really fast. I always think, there are times you don't go really fast. And my ears perk up when I hear, we went really fast in practice. I like to hear that, because it's not going to slow down in games. You want it to be able to slow down, but they're going to play fast. You got to be able to play fast accordingly, and yet kind of slow the game down as you go. I think I liked hearing that they practice fast. Now, the thing that they don't have, because they're so limited in terms of running back depth and having a nothing but, pretty much you got to say Keenan is the guy, and he's going to get 15 to 20 touches anyway. But he's not a guy that you can pound, and he's not a guy that you can do some things with, although he can run it inside. I don't know that they always block it. I did ask Austin Jackson, what's keeping you guys from being able to be that consistent, run the ball, play after play after play? And he said, that might be a coach's question. That might be, he said, I don't call the plays.
Sure.
So, and I thought it was an interesting answer.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, exactly where he was going with that, but that was his answer.
Yeah, well, I thought it was interesting talking to Mike Jinks today. He was candid in his responses and basically said, against Oregon, we needed a bigger back. There were holes that a bigger back could have just burst through, and as far as pass protection as well. But he said that Keenan has showed him that he deserves touches. So it's one of those things where it's a freshman thing again, where this is a tough task for a freshman to be thrown into game 9 and 10 to pick up the things that they need to pick up that fast. But Graham Harrell was asked, how much does that limit what you can do offensively? And it seems like they've had to be creative so far with the injuries at that position.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised they haven't tried to do more swing passes or screens or something to get the ball to him in space but easily and not make it too difficult. They did try a kind of a trick shovel pass or whatever, but I do think it's interesting. They're not guaranteeing that Keenan will play the rest of the, all the games the rest of the year, because that'll put him over the 4 games for the red shirt.
Yeah.
And they're talking about next week, if they get Stephen Carr and Vavai back, which didn't look like they're even a chance to play this week.
Yeah.
But if they get back next week, they might go with them, and then they'd have to make a decision on what did they do with Keenan. Although if they don't get those guys back, Keenan will play, and there will be no red shirt, it looks like. So some intrigue as far as the running back position is concerned the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. There was also intrigue for the special teams coach, John Baxter, especially after that kickoff return for a touchdown from Oregon. You got to talk to him extensively. What did he have to say about that whole situation?
One of the things he said was, why don't you, the obvious question, why didn't you squib it? He said, well, we just don't squib very well. We're not very good at squib kicking. Maybe we should have kicked the little high, short one or whatever, but he said, we just don't do that well. So, okay, we don't do that well. And he talked about like 4 different things happened. It was like this nightmare scenario, which was, he said, it's like in a bowling. He said, sometimes, you throw it down there and you get a strike, and the next time you throw pretty much the same thing and you get a 7-10 split. And he said, they hit like, I know Clay said one guy into another guy, but when you listen to John talk about it, he had like 4 different bad things happen that all had to happen on the kickoff coverage team for that to have happened. He said if all 4 of those don't happen, you don't get that kind of return. But all 4 of them did happen, and you did get that kind of return. And as he was saying, when he sees people coming to talk to him, he said, why am I, being interviewed today? The last 7 weeks, nobody wants to talk to me. And I said, you know what you always said about the long snapper? Nobody wants to talk to him until he sails one over somebody's head. I said, today, you're the long snapper. So he said, yeah, I guess I am.
Yep.
And he was.
Yeah. Now, I'm sure angry USC fans are hearing this and hearing the excuses maybe from John Baxter or us talking about injuries and whatnot and how that limits the offensive play calling. Where do you lie on where these injuries and other type excuses play into the season versus poor coaching?
I don't think it's either or. I mean, these are some unbelievable challenges. I mean, I don't know that I don't remember a team that lost 1, 2, 3 top running backs and then lost their quarterback, the one guy with all the experience and going into an air raid, and the guy with the big arm who showed all kinds of potential in this offense doesn't even make it to the first halftime of the season. So, there's a lot that these guys been put on them. And yet, there are ways in which if you go back and look at the BYU game, you look at the Washington game, you think, even so, this team looked like it might have had the ability, had it not beaten itself, to get through those games. You get through those games, where are you? The Notre Dame game, kind of a flip a coin at that point. And so you're in a whole different place. But because those things went bad early, you're in a much more difficult place now when you have a game like the Oregon game. I mean, it's like, oh my, people are saying, it's a young team and they've had issues, but they're not getting better. And they look across town and they say, UCLA is getting better. And they're, the teams are tied, and UCLA, as you mentioned earlier, UCLA has control of their destiny, where USC does not. So this is pretty challenging. Last year they were 5-4 and lost the last 3 games and finished where we know where they finished. And USC's got the same 3 teams that they did lose to in the second half of the season last year, and they lost to 2 of them at USC. I know people think, how can Cal possibly, they're in as much trouble personnel-wise, quarterback-wise, as USC is, but. They've got to figure out a way to, certainly win one more game to get to a bowl game, which you'd really like to see for these kids. Could they win all 3? Sure. I mean, absolutely. Could they lose? Could they lose them? Maybe. I mean, you just don't know where they're going to be. Last year's team pretty much, except for that Notre Dame game when they kind of gave them a new lease on life by coming out and really throwing the ball and trying to play to the wide receivers and JT's strengths, pretty much packed it in. Whereas we haven't seen that until Saturday, where it looked like you weren't really sure if they did want to do anything other than just get this game over. Now, it was so crazily separated in such a hurry, but 56-7, is really difficult to accept, and that happened makes you wonder. I mean, where do they go from here? They just let a team run off a 56-7 streak on them, and what does that do? I don't think we know.
Yeah, we'll definitely see going forward. As far as injuries go, USC did get some guys back. Talanoa Hufanga, Drake Jackson, and Juliana Falanico returned to practice. Hufanga and Jackson were non-contact jerseys. Helton said that they're not 100% yet, but they're working hard to get back on the field for Saturday. But the rest of the crew, the running backs, no updates there. Clay Helton did say that Stephen Carr was about 90%, but he's not practicing, so that's still TBD there until we actually see him put some pads on.
He did some rehab where he looks really quick. He still looks a little tight with the hamstring, so maybe that an ability to just be free and loose in the open field. Vavai Malapai doesn't look like he's as close as you would like him. And it looks like it might be a little bit wishful thinking that he would be ready to go the next week. Stephen Carr, you would guess, probably will be. But that would only be one running back if he's the only one that comes back. Marquise Stepp is moving a lot better, but he's in a boot, and he's not coming back.
Yeah, and then Liam Jimmons, like Helton said in his Sunday night press conference, if you didn't hear about it, he did dislocate his elbow, so Jimmons will be out for a bit there. And then Jordan Iosefa is still out, so it looks like he's just not there with his knee yet. Clay Helton did say that his knee surgery was more extensive than the last one that he had, so TBD on that front.
I don't think he's even, I think the feeling was, the hope was, at first they were targeting the Notre Dame game. And then they were kind of targeting a 4-game return where he would keep his red shirt and be able to go, have a senior year again next year. And now he's not going to get 4 games in it looks like. So I don't know where he is. Whether they're not going to feel like we need to bring him back or not. But he certainly does not look like he's that much closer than he was 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Yeah. Before we wrap it up, Dan, what is the challenge that this ASU defense presents to this USC team? I know they've kind of been in a slump as a team, but as we've seen with Colorado, sometimes teams against USC awaken and find their new stride. What do you expect from this defense?
We didn't talk about it a lot, but what we were hearing was that they're athletic, that they move a lot, and that they've got some strong, tough kids, especially up front. They always seem to have those kinds of kids, but they're not always certain to play up to their ability. It looked like they might have gotten past that a little bit this year, but then they seemed to kind of hit a wall and have had some tough luck. So, yeah, I think it might be like a Colorado situation. And I think they played Colorado real close, and I think their situations are similar. So, I think you got to show up. Playing a 12:30 game in Tempe, you never know how those are going to go. Those daytime games where everybody's sweating like crazy and all that. It doesn't look like it's going to be super hot, but it's different. Tempe's a different place to play, and sometimes USC's had everything go their way, and sometimes USC's had everything not go their way. And those games are kind of like you just hold on for dear life and hope things go well. But Tempe's an interesting place for USC to play.
Yeah, it's always been interesting when USC goes to play ASU, so we'll see. But that's going to wrap it up for USC's Tuesday practice of ASU Week. For Dan Weber, I'm Keely Eure. For more, check out uscfootball.com.